Welcome to Equine Assisted World. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy, The Long Ride Home and The Healing Land. Before I jump in with today's guest, I just want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do, please like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really helps us get this work done. As you might know from my books, I'm an autism dad. And over the last 20 years, we've developed several equine-assisted, neuroscience-backed certification programs. If you'd like to find out more about them, go to newtrailslearning.com. So without further ado, let's meet today's guest. Welcome back to Equine Assisted World. Big drum roll. I've got Temple Grandin here with us. This is somebody we all need to be mentored by. Those of you who know Horseboy Method, Movement Method, our programs, it all started with me seeking out mentorship from Temple. Why did I do that? Because I'm not autistic. So when my son showed up with autism, I realized that if I went to anybody else for help who didn't have autism, well, what I'd get would be an opinion, not lived experience. And I needed to find somebody who had started life as severe as my son, i.e. nonverbal, etc., and who'd kind of made it. And who's that person? Well, of course, that person is Temple Grandin. So 20 years ago, I sat in an office with you, Temple, and I asked you, how does my son become you? And you told me to do 3 things, and I did those 3 things, and everything worked.
And what were the 3 things?
The 3 things you told me to do were, number 1, follow the child, which in itself was 3 things. You said you have to follow the child physically, like observation, because the kid's not going to tell you, they're nonverbal, what they want to do. You have to follow them so you see the patterns of what they want to do. 2, you said you have to follow them emotionally, which means sensorily. You have to see what's in the environment when they're melting down and what's in the environment when they're happy. And again, because you're observing them, eliminate the bad sensory triggers, which are generally man-made, and you gave me some good ones to go with. And that way the kid will build resilience for when they have to deal with that stuff. And then you said the 3rd thing, I had to follow the child intellectually. And this was a bit of a puzzle for me, because I was like, well, I've got a non-verbal 3-year-old. I'm not having conversations. And you pointed out, you said, but Rupert, it's in the obsessions. It's in the obsessive interests, and it's also in the patterns of the stimming. If it's repetitive banging, if it's right angles of lining things up, that could point to a math science brain. If it's elliptical lining things up and sensory type exploratory stimming, you could be looking at an art storytelling brain, or you could be looking at both. And these things completely made sense to me. And then you said, okay, you've also got to do your stuff outside mostly, because there's fewer bad sensory triggers in nature, because we're just organisms. That's where we're supposed to be. And let him move, because people on the spectrum, indeed most people, are primarily kinesthetic learners. And I followed that advice, and that's what led us to Betsy, and then that's what led us to the horse, and that's what led us to Horseboy Method and him becoming verbal. So just a thing to listeners before we give over to Temple. Seek advice if you're in the neurocognitive field from the population that you serve. Be mentored by them, because they are the ones who actually understand the condition. And then if you do that, you're going to be probably getting rational advice. Okay, so Temple, thank you so much for coming on. I've rambled. Tell us what you're working on at the moment, and what do you think in the neurocognitive field, particularly for the equine practitioners, what should we be most aware of now?
Well, I have found there's kind of 3 ways that autistic kids react to animals. Love them at first sight. The second kind, afraid of them at first, but then if you introduce them slowly and carefully, then they love them. And then there's a few kids where they're probably not appropriate, like they don't like the smell of the animal or something, or they're afraid the horse might whinny. That's kind of patterns I've seen. And I've had parents tell me their kids said their first words on a horse. And I think this has to do with rhythm and balancing going on at the same time. I just got back from the ICANN conference, and there was a PET scan shown there that showed that the cerebellum was underactive, and rhythm and balance stimulates the vestibular system. Those OTs have found years ago that kind of stuff is helpful. And we got to get these kids out doing things, because Katie Peters, our specialist at CSU, did a study, and she compared horses with taking the child out in a beautiful garden park that we own and weightless control. And the horses were the best, but the garden had some efficacy. So I want to emphasize, if you don't have access to horses, just getting them out in nature, getting them out in a park and looking at plants and talking to them, that has some efficacy. I think that's important.
And presumably we want to combine these things, right? We don't just want to
yeah, it would be best if you combine
put kids in isolation in an arena, right?
Totally agree. The best thing to do would be to combine them. And the other problem I'm running into now is we're getting 3-year-olds that are nonverbal onto your wait lists. That's absolutely unacceptable. And there's some parts of the U.S. where that's going on right now. So the worst thing you could do is let them zone out on the phone for 2 years. No, that's what you don't want to have them doing. And one of the things that was a big factor in my therapy was, when I was really little, when I was 2.5, was lots of turn-taking games. Learning how to wait and take turns at games. All kinds of little games. Spinning a coin, we got to take turns spinning the coin. Learn to throw a ball back and forth. Just do little interactive games. And what I suggested, in a lot of situations here, they're not going to have access to horses. Well, let's start church play and library play, and let's tap into the retirees. And there's lots of retirees. Right now, they are using up
intergenerational
budget.
concept. Yeah.
And get them to come in and work with these little kids. And we're going to call it library play for legal reasons. We can't say we're doing therapy, even though we are.
Got it.
It's church play and library play. But we've got...
Also, I prefer the word play, because I have never yet met a kid that wanted therapy. I've met plenty of kids that would like to play, but I never yet met a kid that woke up in the morning and said, hey, you know what I want? I want some therapy. Yeah. No,
but we've got to do something. And these are places I've been to within the last year. This is right now. Right now. Not something from 10 years ago. It's now, the last 12 months. And we've got to start working with them. And we've got to just tap into what resources we've got there in the neighborhood.
So when you say church play and library play, what can you describe what that entails? What does it look like?
Well, a good teacher, I've watched him, just knows how to push just enough to get into the kids' world and interact. So you might start out taking turns. If he's flapping something, take turns flapping it. It's something that basic. Take turns spinning a single coin. Some of this is similar to what's done in the Sunrise program, in an old book called The Hidden Child, emphasized on getting in an interaction going with the kid, where there's some kind of an interaction. And what I have found is some teachers have the knack to do this, and some don't.
But teachers that don't.
Some people just instinctively can engage these kids.
But for the people that don't, and let's face it, a lot of horse people are a little bit too horse focused. What's your advice for how to enter into the world of an autistic child?
Well, you might just, he flaps, you flap.
So some degree of imitation.
It might be that simple. Or let's say we're in a library or church basement or someplace like that. And the good teacher might just start doing something like that. And then gradually get it into where we take turns doing something.
Okay. And is that building what they call theory of mind?
A turn-taking activity. And I've watched these teachers that just have the knack. Some people have it, some don't. And we've got so many retirees. And I just read an article the other day, cruises and golf are not all what it's cracked up to be. They'd probably rather be doing something worthwhile working with these kids. And I don't know what else we can do. The only resources they've got are their church or their library, and or neighborhood group, something like that. And this is something that, real low-income communities could do this.
Yeah, it's about trying.
The worst thing you could do is nothing.
Yeah.
That's the worst thing you could do. Let them watch TV all day or play with phones all day. That's exactly what they should not be doing.
Now, once you've got some interaction going and presumably some theory of mind beginning to form, I've heard you often say we got to get these kids out there doing things.
Yes,
When
absolutely.
when kids are at that fragile state where they're just beginning to come out of their shell, but they're still having trouble understanding top-down instruction, and it could be so easy to kill their confidence and knock them backwards.
Yeah.
What's your advice on beginning to help them to do tasks?
Well, first of all, I just got to interact with them before I can start working on talking.
Mm.
I've got to just get interacting with them. My therapy had a huge amount of emphasis on taking turns at games.
Hmm.
And then you broaden the games that you play. And Bill Gates and I both had a lot of card games, a lot of board games. That's when we got older and we weren't talking. Because
Mm.
what I think this did is it helps you to inhibit a response.
Mm.
Got to wait your turn. That's something really, really important. And then I can remember being taken out for walks and we'd go identify plants and we had maple trees and they call them maple keys, seed things. And you could throw them up in the air and they'd spin like little helicopters. I can remember doing that when I was very young. You could also pull them apart, stick them on your nose. Another thing that we did. Now, other parts of the world won't have that type of tree, but that's something that we had.
Right, but that basic interaction with nature, sort of
It made
sensory,
it, yeah, it's
exploratory
interaction. That's right. It's
science.
interaction.
Yeah.
And I remember making daisy chains as a kid,
Mm.
sitting in the middle of a field doing that. And these are things that didn't, cost anything to do.
I think that's one that you've
Getting
just
you
put your
out doing
finger on.
things. And then a little later on,
Yeah.
it would snow where I lived. And so would it be one sled? And my sister and I had to take turns going on the sled, going down the hill. Learn how to take turns. Just in all sorts of activities.
The daisy chain is interesting to me because the daisy chain is a task, but it's a task that one can do meditatively and also without too much top-down instruction because one can observe how somebody
Or
else
we
does
would
it.
show them how to do it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I remember making daisy chains as a kid. I can remember looking for four-leaf clovers.
Hmm.
That's another thing we used to do because we had a lot of clover where I lived too. And, then we'd go for drives. So it was a game where you spot different things when you're out for a drive. Can you spot a white horse? Can you spot a sign for a particular type of gas station?
Hmm.
There was a game that, we played on car trips. Make car trips less boring.
Right, and I could see how even the I Spy stuff is actually a task
It
because you have a
is. It
mission.
is. I now remember, it was a little cards that we got, and I remember what we did find a white horse. You had to find a certain sign for a certain brand of gasoline,
Mhm.
certain types of cars you looked for. And I remember doing this, and it gave us, made a 2-hour trip a lot less boring.
And of course, one can do that stuff on the back of a horse.
Well, and the other thing I want to talk about is high expectations with accommodations.
Okay, tell us about that.
I'm hearing a lot more problems right now with oppositional defiant and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And there were certain things I was expected to do. Also, I want to let you know there's a new book out by Bill Gates. It's official. He's autistic, called Source Code. And what's interesting is the way he was brought up was very similar to me. When we were fully verbal, we had to sell candy for charity to learn how to talk to people. When we were 8 years old, we had to dress up in good clothes, and when the parents had a party, talk to the guests. Now I'm realizing just how important that was,
Mm.
teaching me on how to go up to people. Well, let's talk about high expectations with accommodations. And he had just the right amount of pressure to do things with some support. And when we went on vacation, we had to go on one of these ferries where you drive onto it, the cars. and this boat had a horrible loud horn. And when we were sitting up on the deck and the horn went up, I flung myself on the deck and I screamed. Now, they did not make me sit under that horn. They let me ride in the cabin below. That was the accommodation. But we are going on that ferry.
Yeah.
But we will make an accommodation. You can sit in the cabin below. Okay, today it'd be noise canceling headsets. That did not exist in the 50s. But that was the accommodation. Then we'd have Sunday dinner at Granny's or at my aunt's house. And I had a place where I could exercise. There was a hall I was allowed to run up and down. And that helped to, keep me calmer. Then there were some rules. You had to sit at the family table for 20 minutes. And then if I asked to be excused, and dessert hadn't been served, I didn't get any. So if I wanted dessert, I had to stay at the table longer. Also, always some choices on doing things. There's things you got to do. We're going to go on that ferry, but you don't have to sit under the horn. You can sit in the cabin under the deck. And that's where I went.
When we get to the point where we now want to think about actual meaningful tasks. So, for example, you were describing selling cookies.
Yeah.
To learn to do, you were describing learning how to talk to people graciously at a dinner at a party when people are being welcomed in. One of the things I feel that is a really sometimes missed opportunity in the equine field is that the kids can do so much around the farm.
Exactly.
And the best programs I see are the ones where the kids are, or adults too, are fully involved to whatever degree they can be in everything from cleaning the poo to landscaping to looking after the chickens to and also particularly learning about tools. Talk to us about that, because
I can remember weeding the garden when I was really young. We had landscaping, and I can remember taking weeds out of that. I was doing that as a really young child. Yeah, kids need to get involved with this sort of stuff.
I remember when I think Rowan was, he's now 23, when he was about 14, I began to worry that he didn't have a work ethic, even though he was growing up on a ranch. And we'd made all sorts of accommodations and and he was doing all his homeschooling. But I was thinking, oh man, this is his time to build technical skills and also physical strength. And how do I do this? How do I do this? And so one day I was going out trail clearing, and I had a machete and I had big clippers to open up a trail. And I knew he'd be really scared of that. And so I said to him, he was talking to me about something. And I said, what you're saying is fascinating, but I have to go and clear this trail. Would you please come and talk to me while I do this so I don't miss what you're saying? And immediately he smelled a rat. He was like, oh, Dad's going to make me do something I don't want to do. So I said, don't worry, I'm not going to make you, use these tools, but I do want to hear what you say. So I wanted him to observe me using them. And then somewhere into that day, I said, do you want to have a go and cut like one branch? And he's like, no, he's totally afraid of failure, of the blade, of everything. And I said, okay, here's my challenge. Can you touch it with the tip of your finger for 1 second? Just 1 second. Can you touch it like that? And I made a big joke out of it. I touched it myself, and they went, oh my gosh, it's really hard. So I was burning, and I fell on the floor, and I pretended to, make a big deal. He laughed. He found that funny. And he did touch it for that 1 second. And then the next day he touched it for 2 seconds. And by the third day, he had a go to clip one thing. Fast forward 2 weeks later, we were in the middle of a thicket, Texas heat, mosquitoes, insects, itching, thorns, scratching. And we were hacking and slashing our way through this and clipping, talking about something. And I realized that not 2 weeks before, he'd had complete fear and resistance, and I now had amnesia that had ever happened. And a sort of penny drop for me about the need for tools and technical skills, but coming into them gradually. I've heard you talk quite a lot about the need for particularly people on the spectrum, to establish these hands-on technical tool-based skills. Can you talk about why that's so important?
Well, just learning how to do things. I can remember in second grade, I was using screwdriver, pliers, and hammer, and I had these little parachutes, and I wanted to design a mechanism to make them open more quickly. And so I learned how to take the pliers and cut coat hangers and bend like the ends so I could make a cross beam like this, tie the strings to. And it wasn't strong enough to just clip it, but I'd make a dent in the coat hanger and then I'd go like this and break it. I remember doing that.
Did someone show you how to do that?
Yeah, somebody, they showed me how to use the pliers, but I wasn't strong enough. I was in second grade to just cut it. I had made a dent and then I bent it like this, and then I could take the ends of the wire and bend it to tie the string on. I used to tinker for hours with stuff like this.
Did you have any point where you were afraid of the tools?
And yeah, in the beginning, I was kind of afraid of the tool. And then you learn how to use it. Okay, hammering nails with a hammer.
Do you remember the process by which you lost your fear?
Lost what?
The process by which you lost your fear.
Gradually using it.
Mm.
I think that someone had to show me how to use it, and then just get me using it. And
I presume people were using these tools around you all the time too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, then you see it. You see, we've got kids growing up today where they're just totally removed from the world of all the practical things. And I think that's a big problem. I think it's a really big problem.
What do you see as the biggest problem with that? Because as you know, up until quite recently, a lot of people have put their faith in tech and said, well, don't worry about that because all these young autistic kids, they're all going to grow up to be techies. So they don't need to learn these hands-on skills anymore. I've heard that.
Ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. We've got to get them out just doing things and then showing them how to do it. I can remember walking on the beach and picking up shells, and then we'd make mosaics and we'd glue the shells to cardboard and make artwork. I was shown how to use the glue to stick the shells on the cardboard. I remember making a turtle that had shells for its, made the shell of the turtle out of shells. But someone shows you how to do it, and then I really liked doing those things.
What's the neuroscience, more or less, of learning how to use these tools? Like, what does it do to your brain? Why is it important?
Well, I know that my sister and I also had rock collections. And one of the things we loved to do is take a hammer and bust a rock in half to see what it looked like inside.
Mm-hmm.
And we did quite a bit of that. See, what happened today, like there are apartment buildings right near where I live, and you never even know that kids live in those buildings. Except I see the school bus unloading them and loading them. That's the only way I would know that, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, fairly little kids living in that building. Even though it has a nice fenced-in playground, I never see the kids on it. I think that's a shame. And there's a lot of controversy now about problems with social media being bad. We just got to limit the screens and get them out doing real stuff, all kinds of real stuff.
Again,
what choices? And this was done with Bill Gates. His mother put him in Cub Scouts. Get him out doing things. When we went away for the summer, there was a neighborhood children's group where we played softball and different organized games with maybe 7 or 8 kids. And that got me out of my room doing things. Mm-hmm. We've got to get them out doing things. And if you have horses available, great. And then the kids should be helping to clean the stalls and take care of the horses.
I think it's helpful for people to actually sort of understand a little bit what goes on in the brain if kids do this stuff, and what doesn't go on in the brain if they don't do this stuff. Do you have any insights there?
Well, She's just getting out and doing the motor stuff. I mean, the occupational therapist all the time talk about heavy work and exercise is calming. But I worked with people that owned big machine shops that were definitely autistic. And they just grew up with tools. They took shop class when they was in high school. I think one of the worst things the schools have done is taking out the hands-on classes.
Right.
When I was in elementary school, I did shop class in 5th grade. I was sewing with a toy sewing machine that actually sewed in 4th grade. 1st grade, we did all kinds of clay projects. And of course, in my generation, we made ashtrays. That would never happen now. But our school had all of these hands-on activities. And we can't do everything online.
No. Again, if we...
I think we need to we were limited to 1 hour of television a day. Wasn't banned, and Mother had to approve the shows. Lassie was definitely approved. Also, on the news, you didn't see some of the stuff you're seeing now. The news was just talking heads and kind of boring. I didn't want to watch that in the 50s.
If you don't cultivate these motor skills, what is the cost to the brain? What does not happen that should happen?
I think there's just one thing that calms the kids down doing these things. Also, I look at things very career-oriented.
Okay.
This can lead to careers. Now, let's say you have a kid that's good at math. Now, it's not going to show up in a 3-year-old, but let's say around age 6, 7, really good at math. You need to move ahead in math. Don't do baby boring math. Move them ahead. That's not being done. See, there's kind of a philosophy in a lot of our schools that kids are just all the same. And they're not all the same. And we need to be building on strengths. So, I mean, my art ability was encouraged. And I was encouraged to draw lots and lots of different kinds of things.
So these days, or until recently anyway, there has been, like I said, this great faith in tech. And because so many techies are on the spectrum, I think there's been perhaps a bit of a skewed perspective that, well, it doesn't matter if these kids grew up with practical skills because they're going to go on and become techies working in the tech industry.
Well, I think
what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, they can go ahead and work in the tech industry, but you still need to be doing practical things. And let's look at Steve Jobs. He was playing around with tools in his next door neighbor's garage. But Steve Jobs was doing.
Because
it wasn't just all devices.
Right. And it seems to me that with AI coming in so fast, a lot of the tech jobs of the last 20 years will change, right?
Another reason for teaching skilled trades is they'll be laughing all the way to the bank. They'll have jobs when other people are getting laid off. Low-level programming is already getting replaced. The video game industry just laid off a whole ton of people. I've been reading in the Wall Street Journal, this corporate office now laid off a bunch of people. Some companies do it nicely, some companies do it nasty. But some of these jobs are going to be getting replaced with AI, where things like fixing elevators, it's not. And as I travel around, I'm seeing way too many elevators that are not being serviced, broken, or making really weird, ominous noises, like I'm going to get stuck in it right now. I was in hotels the other day where one of the cars, there were 6 elevators there, and so that one on the left, we're not going in. I don't like the way it's acting. We'll wait for another one.
Okay.
Getting stuck in an elevator is not something I want to do.
Now, some people would say
I don't need to have that experience.
Some people would say that, oh, well, all those jobs are going to be replaced by robots.
No, BS.
Why is that BS?
Well, one of the problems is you've got lots of different kinds of elevators. You've got some variable. And I want to talk now some about the different kinds of thinkers. And I discussed that in my book, Visual Thinking. And I'm an object visualizer. So the kinds of things I'm going to be good at is building things, working with animals, because animals live in a sensory world, photography, and art. And then you have your mathematical mind that's totally, interested in patterns, music and math go together. And then you got the autistic kids, more of a word thinker. They know all the word facts about their favorite movies or favorite type of sports, something like that. And the ones that are object visualizers like me, we can't do higher math. I'm worried that algebra requirements are going to screen us out, but you need us. I had a very interesting flight on a plane just about a month ago. I talked to a military veteran, went in the Army, and she failed algebra in college. But she took the mechanical aptitude test for the Army, got a super high score. They put her to work fixing airplanes. Mechanical aptitude is a skill. That's definitely merit-based. And our school system doesn't put any value on that. They value mathematical skill and they value language skill, but not mechanical aptitude. And I think that's a problem.
As you say, shop has been taken out.
Why? And what we're doing, we're putting shop back in the community colleges, but that's almost too late. We need to be hooking kids much earlier on tools and things like that. And I was doing this stuff in what in Europe you'd call primary school. We call it elementary school. I'm working on these things really early.
Should we, in that case, if we're equine practitioners, should we have a shop? Should we have a workshop where?
Well, I think we ought to have a workshop.
Because this is often not there. It's often, kids come, they're put on a horse, they're given their session, and then they go home.
Well, and I think we need to be, get the kids involved with everything with the horse, putting the tack on the horse, grooming the horse before and after, cleaning stalls, feeding them.
Does it need to go further than that? Do we need to be doing the leather work? Do we need to be sewing up, boards to build new stores, the fencing,
yeah, and when I took care of horses when I was in high school and the horse kicked a hole in the back of the stall, yeah, I did fix it.
Yeah.
Something that I did. And I did do some carpentry, simple carpentry work on the barn. But I remember one of the horses, I kicked the whole back of the stall out. And I went and I found these super hard old oak boards. It was so hard you couldn't nail nails from. And put them up in the back of the stall, and he was not able to kick those.
So would it be a really good idea, for example, let's say you're an overworked person running a therapeutic riding program and you're just busy with the whole thing. You talked earlier about getting retirees in to help.
Well, we need to be getting retirees in. And the other thing is, I know that like in a PATH program, everyone's very concerned about safety, getting sued and stuff like that. That can get to the point where that can cripple you. Because I'd like to see a retired mechanic come in and start teaching some auto shop to some of these. Not the 5-year-olds, but some of the older kids. And some of the people that are in the tech industry have been extremely successful weren't just all screens. They were out doing all kinds of hands-on stuff.
Right. Well, yes, the generation that created the tech industry, of course, there were no screens when they were growing up.
Well, the other difference on the video games is that some of the older tech people, when video games would crash all the time, and instead of just coming up with a blue screen of death saying the system's crashed, all this code would show up. I call it a computer showing its guts. Okay. When the old systems crashed, you then got a blue screen full of code. Well, that would get the kid interested. That doesn't happen now.
Yeah.
They just it's just off, and that's now a system error. I remember when Microsoft crashed and all the airport screens were blue, but it doesn't show code. The older stuff, when it broke, it showed code.
It seems to me what you're really talking about here is problem solving.
Yep. And then the other thing with some of the older stuff, they were making hardware too. Actually putting components together. It was much more hands-on.
Yeah, building motherboards.
Yeah, and that's building things.
Yeah.
And now it's just all online.
Okay, so I'm listening to this. I'm a therapeutic riding barn owner. Let's say, okay, I've heard you, so I'm going to reach out to my local retirement communities. I'm going to find who are the people there who know how to have these practical skills. I create a shop where all this technical stuff is going on in the therapeutic riding campus,
Yeah,
if you
I'm
like.
seeing it broadening it out, and I
Mm,
think horses are very important. But the other thing I did for the horses is I spent hours getting ready for a junior show, English equitation. I also showed in a small, open, regular horse show, just a little small local show. And I would go in the trail class. And we had to practice going up and opening the mailbox. But we showed in horse shows open to the public, real horse shows.
mm, mm,
Myself and my roommate, and when we went to the special school. I think that was important. We went to real horse shows and we showed in them.
mm.
And they were either a 4-H show or a very small little local horse show, but it was still an open, normal horse show. And
There's
then
a
you've got to learn, all the behaviors you got to do there.
and have to deal with a long
Listen,
day.
and that's, I had two parts of horses: getting ready for show, going to horse shows, and then taking care of them.
Mm.
I cleaned 9 stalls every day. I fed them. I was very responsible. When somebody says responsibility, I see this big wooden grain box that had prenomoline in it. And you got to shut that lid and turn the latch, because if a horse gets into that, they can die. So when I think of responsibility, I make sure I put the lid down and I turn the latch.
Do you remember
I
yourself?
remember that very well. And they trusted me that I would always close that box and turn the latch after I fed the horses.
What's your memory personally of when you came from sort of non-verbal to verbal? Do you have a sense in your memory of like fog clearing or something like that?
It was more like I could, if grown-ups talked fast, it went to gibberish.
Mm,
If grown-ups talked slowly, I could understand. In fact,
mm.
I thought the grown-ups had their own language. I used to call it grown-up talk. And then as I started to get my words that came in a few stressed words at a time, single words, I was slow to get it out. And it was very frustrating. I remember when I was 5. And by this time I was verbal. I was in kindergarten class. And we had a little assignment where there were pictures of things like a bicycle, a suitcase, a bird bath, and other things, and a house. And we had to mark all the pictures that began with B as in beautiful. So I marked the suitcase for B for bag, and the teacher marked it wrong. And I wasn't given time to explain that we called suitcases bags, that I did understand the B concept. I was 5. And I just couldn't get it out fast enough. That was very frustrating. I could talk at this point, but it was like a slow computer. It took me time to get it out.
When did that change? And why did that change, do you think?
Well, I think just as I developed, I got better.
But not everybody
By that time I could,
well.
I remember a time before I could talk,
Mm.
getting extremely frustrated, didn't want to wear a hat. And we were in the driveway. We were going to drive to the little school that the teachers taught out of their house where I got early intervention. So I just thought, I'm going to scream and throw it on the floor of the car. My mother said, pick it up. So then I chucked it out the window on our driveway. She made me go get it. And then I got the brilliant idea of throwing it out the window when we were driving. But back in the 50s, cars had crank windows. And I wasn't strong enough to turn the crank. So Mother had her window open, so I leaned over her and I chucked the hat. And that caused it to swerve, and we got sideswiped by a tractor trailer. Very lucky we weren't killed. But I can remember thinking to myself, I'm going to scream now. This is how I'm going to say I don't want to wear the hat. I actually thought about that. See, I may have been, quite younger than 5. By 5, I could talk, but I was slow to get the words out. I remember this assignment very clearly when I marked the suitcase B for bag. And they didn't give me time to explain that in our house, those were bags. And that began with B.
You then developed where you could compute language faster and get it
Well,
out.
yeah, I did. I got a whole lot better, but it
And
came slowly. I was not an echolalic kid.
right,
Absolutely not the echolalic type
you
of
were
kid.
not echolalic. Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, my speech came in a few stressed words at a time.
When
Single
you say
word.
stressed words, what do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I might go, bah, the ball.
I see.
And I didn't hear the B and the L. So my speech teacher did a lot of slow enunciation. Like she'd hold up a cup and she'd go, cup, and then she'd go, cup, pa. Really slowing it down and enunciating those hard consonant sounds. Because otherwise I tended to hit, You see, my problem was I've got some auditory processing problems, and I don't hear consonants. Like if you said sat or rat, I don't think I ratted, rat on a chair. I sat on a chair. And I still have to figure out some of those words by context.
Okay.
I don't think I'd have a pet bat, but I might have a pet cat. Just deliberately emphasized sounds there.
What
No,
do
I
you
was
think?
definitely not echolalic.
Do you think?
I had some auditory processing because when the grown-ups talked too fast, it went to gibberish.
Mm,
If you're in the equine assisted field, or if you're considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to consider taking one of our 3 neuroscience-backed equine assisted programs. Horseboy Method, now established for 20 years, is the original equine assisted program specifically designed for autism, mentored by and developed in conjunction with Dr. Temple Grandin and many other neuroscientists. We work in the saddle with younger children, helping them create oxytocin in their bodies and neuroplasticity in the brain. It works incredibly well. It's now in about 40 countries. Check it out. If you're working without horses, you might want to look at movement method, which gets a very, very similar effect, but can also be applied in schools, in homes. If you're working with families, you can give them really tangible exercises to do at home that will create neuroplasticity when they're not with you. Finally, we have taquine equine integration. If you know anything about our programs, you know that we need a really high standard of horsemanship in order to create the oxytocin in the body of the person that we're working with, child or adult. So this means we need to train a horse in collection, but this also has a really beneficial effect on the horse's well-being. And it also ends your time conflict where you're wondering, oh my gosh, how am I going to condition my horses and maintain them and give them what they need, as well as serving my clients? Taquine equine integration, aimed at a more adult client base, absolutely gives you this.
and it's interesting because I'm in a position now where I'm having to learn a 3rd language later in life, and it's exactly the same. So my German is actually quite good if I'm speaking one-to-one. Some lots of grammatical mistakes, but I can definitely
You can
converse.
communicate, yeah.
But as soon as true German speakers are just like properly fast back and forth,
Yeah.
I'm lost. And I presume that with more and more exposure, it'll get less, and it is
Oh,
indeed.
it'll get better. That's sort of the way
It does give one such empathy for kids that are struggling with speech. Do you think, here's a question, all of those things that you did, so very young, in terms of this exposure to nature, a lot of these tasks, a lot of the fact that life was quite physical. If you had been growing up now and you had been looking at screens a lot, because that's just the culture and it's easier, and as you say, you drive past these apartment buildings where you don't know that there's kids in there because you don't see them
Exactly.
outside
We've got
playing.
one right
If you
a block away from where I live.
let's say that Temple Grandin is a little girl today with the same issues, but now being exposed to a lot of screen time, what do you think what would have happened to you? What would happen to you?
I don't think I would have developed as well.
Okay.
No. You got to get out and do things. And then things I'm realizing how important things like the parties. Like when we had a party, my parents had a party. When I was like 8 and 9 years old, all the kids in our neighborhood did this. It was just a 50s thing. But then when I found out Bill Gates did the same thing, and when the guests came, you had to greet them at the door and say, "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Wood." You take your coat. And we weren't allowed to use their first names. Everything was really formal. That taught interaction. And the other thing is, a lot of autistic kids today, the mom does all the talking. They'll come up to me at the book table, and the mom will say, "My son wants to get the book signed." Well, the kid needs to be asking to get the book signed. The parents do too much for the kid. I'm seeing way too many smart teenagers that have never gone shopping by themselves. These are things I was doing when I was 8, 10 years old by myself. They just aren't doing enough stuff. There's a big problem even with normal students. When they start to fail a class, they don't ask for help soon enough. It's a really serious problem.
Again, why do you think that is?
Well, I think it goes back to these parties. You learn how to talk to people and selling stuff for charity.
Are we living a much more isolated life than we used to?
You've got to talk to the people.
Right, but do you think that's not happening anymore? Do you think
No, it's not happening.
Okay.
It's
Why
not
do you think
happening.
it's not happening? Why is it not happening?
Well, the mom just does it all for them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like if I go to the supermarket and there's a girl that's selling Girl Scout cookies, mom is right there doing most of the talking. The kids should be walking up to the customers and asking them.
Now, in this day and
Not
age,
doing that.
things can be dangerous, so mum might need to be there
Well, what
for
Mrs.
safety.
Gates
So what's
did,
the what's
let
the
me tell you
middle
what
line?
Mrs. Gates did. She'd drive Bill around the neighborhood, park in front of the house, and Bill would have to go up to the door. She's right there, she can see it. But he had to go up to the door alone and sell those mixed nuts was what he was selling.
And I guess
He had to
perhaps
sell the
something,
stuff.
could we
Yeah.
at Therapeutic Riding Barns, could we simulate these things? Like, for example, could we say, okay, today is cookie selling day at the barn.
Yeah, sure you could.
So that's a controlled environment where we can give support. We can make sure the child is safe.
Well,
But
that's
we
right.
can also get them to expand their comfort zone a bit.
But we get them, my brother is not autistic. He hated the parties, hated them. But you know what he admitted? He admitted that it helped him to become a senior bank vice president because he could talk to older men. And his friends weren't able to do that.
That's interesting.
And so my non-autistic brother was helpful. This party thing was something everybody did in the 50s in my neighborhood.
Yes,
8 or
learning
9 years
diplomacy.
old when it started, put your good clothes on, greet the guests, learn how to talk to them. And I thought it was interesting that the way Bill Gates was brought up was very similar. And he had to do the party thing and selling stuff.
So, for example, again, let's say we're running a therapeutic riding place. Would it be a good idea for us to have the kids take turns being greeters? Let's say we have these families showing up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. That would be kind of the same thing. You could do that at therapeutic riding place.
Okay.
Because a lot of these kids, they're too scared to come out and just talk to people. And there's a scene in the HBO movie where I go up to the editor of the magazine and I get his card. Well, selling stuff made it easy to go up and ask for the card.
Right. How would you have dealt with rejection,
and
though?
Working for that magazine was very important for getting my career started.
No doubt. Let's say he'd given you a negative reaction. Let's say he'd said, "No, go away. You're weird. I don't want to talk to you." Would that have crushed you? Or would you have had the resilience to
I think
say,
it would
"Okay,
have resilience because sometimes you had some customer in the neighborhood that told you to go away.
Okay.
Yeah, you say they didn't want to buy the candy. And we knew which houses were grouchy. And you still had to go up to them.
Because when we're dealing with people that have overdeveloped amygdalas, we're dealing with people with a lot of anxiety.
And they get scared easily.
Rejection is a thing, right? It's a big thing. So how do we dance around that?
Well, the other customers didn't reject it. I remember writing an article one time and somebody wrote a really nasty letter to the editor, and I was really upset about that. And I talked to several people about it, and they said that you need to, it's just one letter. Other people liked the article, but I was very upset about that.
What if we then, let's say we set this program up at a therapeutic riding barn where the kids are greeting and the
Yep.
kids are selling? Could
Yep.
we also then set up some situations in which they are rejected or refused in a controlled situation where like Mr. and Mrs. Grouch come in and we even make like a
Well,
joke
then
out of
you
it or
have
something?
people that kind of play Mr. and Mrs. Scrooge,
Yeah.
and
Role play.
not have them do anything really mean or anything, but just say, no, I don't want to buy that today. I
Right.
just don't like that.
And to gradually
I
build
don't
some
want cookies.
resilience
I got
this
enough
way.
cookies. And then just walk off.
Right.
So
I could see that.
I'd like to have a bunch of success first before that happens.
Right. So yeah, build success, but then gradually have controlled other types of
Well, and then
reaction.
other things, the other thing I think is important is I have a lot of grandparents come up to me and they discover they're autistic, later in life. They all have decent careers, good jobs. That's because at age 11, they had paper routes. Now, I know those no longer exist, but we got to do paper route substitutes. Walking the neighbor's dog, maybe a church volunteer job. It's very important that the boss is somebody outside the family. It's Mr. Jones's dog, not your own dog. And you have to do it every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and be on time and take it out for a half an hour walk.
Again, this sounds like something we could set up at
That's right.
good therapeutic things, provided we
Yeah.
have the manpower, which might go back to getting retirees into help.
Well, I think when I took a look at 2 weeks ago, when I took a look at our national budget, I looked it up in the business magazines, and I just had sort of, we got to tap into retirees. They're half our national budget.
Mm.
We've got to tap into them. And a lot of them would like to have the opportunity to work with the kids so they can really make a difference. I'm 77 years old. I'm still working.
Mm.
Some of these retirees are 55 or 60, 20 years, 15 years younger than me.
Mm. I wonder what's the best way to go find them. I mean, would one literally just sort of go to retirement communities or?
Oh, you just have to we have a senior center over here,
Mm-hmm.
by a few, less than a quarter of a mile from where I live.
I'm just writing this down because what I'm doing,
Just tapping into the community.
yeah,
And you would do it one person at a time, word of mouth. And because the other thing that's a problem on the entire developed world is funding's drying up. All right,
okay.
I know about research funding in my field. In the 70s, money flowed like water. I've been in the industry 50 years now. Then in the 90s, they started shutting labs down. It's a trend line like this. As retirees take more and more of the money, other things went down like this. Things like funding for the space program. I gave a talk at the Jet Propulsion Lab 10 years ago, and I got their annual report, and I was not very happy with what I saw happening to their budget. This is 10 years ago. It's going down. And this is happening in all the developed countries.
Because the population is aging.
We need to tap into the resources we've got in the communities, and retirees is one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it seems to me too. I mean, growing up as a child of colonial Africans in the UK, intergenerational life was very much just the norm, and I learned so much from older people when I was a kid. A bunch of skills, because also older people were often very physically active and physically able, so they would be the ones showing you how to use a tool or
Oh, that's
up a
right.
horse.
Yeah, they'd be retired car mechanics, carpenters. Like right now I've got back problems. I can't lift much anymore. But there's a lot of things you still can do.
Yeah. I would
You're gonna
imagine
place in the
too,
shop, then you use that to lift stuff.
there has to be an impact on the brain too if we don't get this intergenerational contact,
I
right?
think it's
Because
something that we need to be tapping into because of funding. Like when you look at funding for science, okay, I had a chance to visit the vehicle assembly building where they put together the original moon rocket. I got a chance to go inside it. And I remember standing outside of it and going, oh, this is the greatest thing my generation did. Then when I went inside it, I'm going, am I hallucinating right now? Am I seeing what I think I'm seeing in there? That I'm seeing scaffolding inside here for multiple rockets, not one rocket, multiple rockets. I was seeing scaffolding in there for multiple rockets. I was not hallucinating. And I realized as I looked at it, they had an open bank vault for that project. Because you look at SpaceX's building, it's a modified steel building.
mm,
You know, he one thing that SpaceX figured out how to do is how to make that rocket reusable, make it land on its tail. That saves half your cost right there because you're not throwing that rocket booster in the ocean. The other thing you learn is commercially available equipment works. You don't have to have, regular electronics will work. See, and that's, but when I went in that building, I'm going, they had big visions. Also, when you went up on the roof of it, there were big I-beams sticking out of the corners of the building. And that's so you could build a higher one for even a bigger rocket. Of course, that never happened. Most people don't know about the I-beams. No, I went up on that flat roof and I put my hands right on them. Big I-beam, sticking out of the corners of the roof.
I think you put your finger on something there when you said electronics. Again, here am I running a therapeutic riding thing. Should I have some retirees coming in, running a sort of electronics shop where we're
Yes, I
maybe
think that
fixing
would be
radios and stuff?
great. And the other thing is fixing computers for people.
Right.
And we throw away so much electronics. It's just disgusting.
Mm.
Like, for example, monitor, like I have now. Like when a monitor starts to go out and it starts to flicker, it means the power supply is failing. And I had a monitor that did that, and really nice monitor. Screen still worked. I looked it up on YouTube. I found out exactly what was wrong with that monitor. It needed a new power supply. Now, that's something I could have done myself. I kept it for a whole year. Then finally, I had my friend come in and help clean my house, and, well, it ended up in the dumpster, I hate to say. But I can tell you right now, let's say that monitor had existed out on my aunt's ranch. They were really low on money. It would have fixed. And if I couldn't get the exact power supply, I'd have to just make sure the output is the same. I would have built an external power supply for it, put it in a plastic box so it wouldn't get shocked. I know how to solder. We would have fixed that monitor.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
I felt, this was probably about 3 years ago, and that monitor went in the garbage. I felt kind of guilty about that, but I'm just so busy, travel and things like that. But all that was wrong with it was they put a cheap power supply in it. And you have to just put in a new power supply. It would have worked. I went online, went on to YouTube, and found out exactly what was wrong with it. But it would have required taking the thing apart. It would have required some soldering, the stuff I actually know how to do. Now, if I'd been in a situation where I wouldn't have a monitor otherwise, yeah, it would have been fixed.
The problem-solving sort of sequences that you're describing, from learning these early turn-taking games through very, very basic tasks, a daisy chain, to learning how to fix some basic things, or at least participate in it, to going to sort of a higher cognitive process. This sounds a lot to me like BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? The neurotrophins within the brain that seem to rely upon a certain amount of physical movement to create these problem-solving abilities.
Well, you have to do it, and my skills in the paper library transferred right over to looking things up online. I was very good. I'd go to the card catalog and I'd find a bunch of books in my subject, and I'd very carefully go through maybe a 6-foot section of shelf, looking at the table of contents of the books, and I'd find them. People say, well, how do you do that? Well, I can go online and start putting keywords in, and I can do that. And you got to use different keywords. I tell students, cattle's got different keywords. Cows, bulls, steers, heifers, cattle.
Fine.
You got to do a separate search with each one of those keywords.
Tell us about your brain. You've had people study your brain. What differences did they find? And what insights did you get from that?
Huge visual thinking circuits. Huge visual thinking circuits. But smaller circuits for speak what I see. Much smaller circuit for that. And that would explain how the speech came in slowly. I was not one of these echolalic kids that was yakking out an entire movie script but doesn't know what it means.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely not one of those.
And these visual parts of the brain, these circuits, where are they?
They're right here in the back. Old back third of the brain's involved in vision.
Mm-hmm.
Very big part of the brain. And in looking at these PET scans that were showing the visual cortex was turned on, cerebellum was about black. I mean, nothing was going on in the cerebellum. Maybe this explains why the activities that stimulate the cerebellum, like horseback riding, for example, are so beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And the OTs I've learned from years ago do lots of swinging, lots of balancing activities, that these things have a good effect. And that's been known for years.
And is your cerebellum still underactive? Like, do you have to do things for it?
My cerebellum is 20% smaller than normal.
Okay.
That's definitely known. And I had PET scans done, but I don't think they were this way. I don't think they sliced down far enough. I got to go dig those PET scans out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they went down far enough to, they didn't do the sagittal section. They didn't do that. And the ones that showed it were the sagittal, were like cut this way.
So you're talking about rocking
I have
balancing.
are not. Well,
Right.
The ones I had, I think only went down about this far, and that wouldn't hit the cerebellum. So I wouldn't know.
Do you do things now consciously to work your cerebellum out?
Well, I've learned, one thing I've learned to help back pain is I'm making myself look at the ceiling of the airport when I walk through the airport. And I was showing a lady yesterday in the supermarket, and she was complaining about her back hurting. I said, when you walk through the supermarket, make sure you can see the steel beams in the ceiling. That forces you to stand up. Well, you still have to see the floor. But when I can see the steel beams, then the supermarket's brand new and it's built like a factory building, basically. It's all open steel beams on the ceiling. If I way I used to walk, I couldn't see the steel beams.
How does that help your cerebellum?
Now I'm finding I'm not doing all that much right now.
But when you're looking
things like riding, you see, when you hear where the mom will say, he did his first words on a horse.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cerebellum. You're stimulating the vestibular system. You're stimulating the cerebellum. OTs for years have known that was good. And then you had the old Miller method from years ago, and they'd have kind of contraptions that the kids would climb on and balance. But even something as simple as nail a 2x4 board to the floor and just have them walk the tightrope on a board nailed on the floor, simple balancing things like that can sometimes be helpful.
So as much balancing activity as you can possibly do.
Yeah, lots of balancing activity. You see, and that stimulates the cerebellum. And that seems to be good. And my cerebellum is smaller than normal.
Now, when you're walking through that supermarket and you're looking at the beams, is that helping your cerebellum? Because is that
It's
changing your
helping my
balance?
back. I can tell you right now, it's helping my back.
Right.
And I have to make myself do it because I tend to lean forward. And then I realized that I'm, well, it's just like walking through the jet bridge to go on a plane.
Mhm.
And now when I think about a jet bridge, I'm seeing how the lights are configured in the ceiling.
Mhm.
Until I started doing it, I realized I'd never even looked at the ceiling of a jet bridge before.
Right.
And the same thing with ceiling at the airport. I just discovered Newark Airport's got a pigeon and it can fly the entire concourse full speed. I wouldn't have noticed that before.
Do you think that when you're looking up now as a 77-year-old woman and changing that perspective, you're changing your
Well, it
balance,
makes
right?
me
You must
stand up. It's
still
one of the
be.
things it does. And I've got the ladies at the ticket counter doing it too. I said,
Uh-huh.
you got to find every stained ceiling tile in that airport. And it's making a difference. And they said that when I walk up to the ticket counter, that they can see that I'm standing up better.
Mm-hmm.
And it has helped my back.
And surely that must also stimulate your vestibular system a bit because you're changing your normal balance, right? You're
Well, the other thing
introducing
I'll
a
do,
different
like if I
balance.
got a big long hotel hallway
Mm.
or a big long empty airport corridor, I'll go, now don't walk like an old lady. And I'll go fast down the terminal. Now, if it's crowded, obviously I don't do that. And I'll do that in a hotel corridor too, big long hotel corridor. I obviously don't do it on uneven ground, but where's the smooth carpet, big long hotel corridor, I'll go, don't walk like an old lady. I'll make myself walk fast down it. I'm doing that now.
Have you had your amygdala looked at?
Yes, I have, and the right amygdala is bigger than normal.
Okay. What do you attribute that to?
Well, that's just the way it was. And I had horrible problems with anxiety, and it started at puberty when the hormones hit. Horrible, horrible anxiety that's now controlled with antidepressant medication. Another thing that helps controlling it is a burst of hard exercise.
Okay.
And where I talk about my anxiety issues, I discuss that in my old book, Thinking in Pictures, which I just did a new foreword for this. And in a burst of hard exercise, I do 120 old lady push-ups every night. Only the front half comes up. And then I'll do 100 strokes laying on the floor swimming. And when I first started doing that, I couldn't get my legs off the ground. Well, I can now.
Mm.
And I find that burst of hard exercise is also very helpful.
Let's talk about anti-anxiety medications. As we now know, we're dealing with a population that is largely medicated rather than a population that is in which the minorities and the exceptions
Well,
are
one thing
medicated.
is you want to use a low dose. I take one antidepressant, low dose, starter dose or less. Okay, let's say I'm taking one of the old tricyclic because I started before Prozac existed. And if you're doing Prozac, it's starter dose or less. The big mistake that gets made is if follow the label, it's too high. And then you will get agitation and insomnia. It's starter dose or less. And if you start to feel like you drank 50 cups of coffee, you cut the dose. Don't raise it. Cut the dose. And that's all explained in here. Even though it's old, it's still accurate.
So when you cut the dose,
It just works. I
you go
probably
down
had
to like
100
a quarter
parents.
pill or something? Like what? How would you cut that dose?
You'd have, one way is to get liquid version, or you have to cut the pills. But usually the starter dose will work.
Okay.
The starter dose size. Because I've had parents go, oh, he was great. With a low dose, we doubled it and it was awful.
Mm.
And what they should have done is gone back to the low dose. And that most people, the starter dose works.
Now, you and I both know that many parents or people who are taking anti-anxiety medications are under a lot of pressure, often to up the dose, not.
No, there's a point where you don't.
Yeah.
No, I have been on the same dose since my early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Don't. You don't want to get into an escalating dose. No, I resisted that. The other important thing is the exercise. Also very, very important.
Did you find yourself under pressure to up your dose? And if so, how did you
I
resist?
knew it would be trouble.
Okay. Why
This
did you
is
know it
correct.
would be trouble?
Well,
What gave you that insight?
Well, you're going to get poisoned for one thing, possibly. And the other thing I found is the nerves went in cycles. And before I took the medication, my nerves were going, I have to use English speed limits for cars, but this was the analogy. I was going 200 miles an hour, between 200 miles an hour and 100 miles an hour. When I went on the medication, I was going 55 miles an hour to 100. They still cycled. And I knew that the nerves went in cycles. So I toughed out the cycle. And then that dose still worked. Because I knew I'd be in trouble if I kept taking higher and higher doses. The other thing is you want to avoid the Valium, all the benzo drugs. You want to avoid those.
Talk to us about why.
Well, you can't get off of them. And they have to keep upping the dose.
Because you build a tolerance.
Antidepressants now, you can stay on the same dose.
Okay.
And also you got to do the exercise.
If you don't do the exercise,
you're going to be in trouble. You have to do.
Talk to us about why. Why is the exercise so important for the mental?
Well, I've actually looked up some research, and in a burst of hard exercise, just walking. Okay, I walk a lot in the airport. That doesn't do it. I've got to do the burst of hard exercise where I do those 120 push-ups in like 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I swim the strokes without stopping. Whole thing takes just over 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
But that burst of hard exercise, there's now some research on this. Of course, I've looked up a lot of this stuff. But the burst of hard exercise, where you put the exercise machine on a hard setting, but you have to work up to that. I didn't do 100 strokes swimming on the floor in the beginning, and then I used to do sit-ups, but then that started hurting my sciatic nerve, so I had to stop that. But I do 100 sit-ups without stopping.
Now,
but it took a while to work up to that. You don't do that overnight.
You were doing some research into these short bursts of hard exercise.
I did some research on it.
What did the research say?
Said it worked.
Did they say why?
No.
Okay. Is it endorphins?
Well, the burst of hard exercise, I just from a little bit worked better than quite a lot of walking.
Okay. So again, let's say we are equine therapy practitioners.
But on the other hand, you got to work up to it slowly. Okay, I was doing all these sit-ups. I didn't start off doing 100 sit-ups. It took me 3 months to work up to that.
But to get a bit out of breath.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have to get a bit out of breath.
And how many times a day would one need to do this?
Just once.
Really?
I just do it once.
If you're a horse nerd, and if you're on this podcast, I'm guessing you are, then you've probably also always wondered a little bit about the old master's system of dressage training. If you go and check out our Helios Harmony program, we outline there step by step exactly how to train your horse from the ground to become the dressage horse of your dreams in a way that absolutely serves the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of the horse and the rider. Intrigued? Like to know more? Go to our website, heliosharmony.com. Check out the free introduction course. Take it from there.
What if you're a child or an adolescent? Do you not need more?
Maybe you do. Mother used to say, go outside and run the energy out of you.
Yeah. I mean, it's all the common sense stuff, isn't it? But it's the stuff one just sees less and less of.
Well, I think way too many drugs are given out to little kids. Way too many drugs. I was an adult when I started taking this. I take one medication. Low dose of an antidepressant.
Do you think ideally we should wait till someone's an adult before?
Well,
I think medications in general.
The way I look at it is the younger the kid, the more cautious you need to be.
Yeah.
That would be kind of how I'd look at it. But I'm horrified when I find out there's a 6-year-old on 7 drugs, a lot of them heavy-duty antipsychotics. And then when you talk to the parents, no thought went into it. Every time there was a meltdown, throw another prescription at it. And that's bad. And the kid now is obese because some of those drugs are appetite stimulants.
Yeah.
Actually, things like Abilify and some of that stuff, Zyprexa is real bad on that.
Let's say a kid is on those 7 medications and it's having a clear ill effect on their body.
Well, or try to get rid of some of the medications.
How does
The
one
The
scale
first
back?
thing I want to do is to try to figure out what when they first prescribed them, what were they trying to do?
Mm,
See, the other mistake that's made is you need to try one thing at a time. You don't start a diet and a drug at the same time. You don't start a new school and a drug at the same time. Otherwise, you don't know what worked.
mm,
And then if you've got to try medication, try one medication at a time, see what it does.
mm.
Take notes on it. And then some of the kids need to be gotten off of some of this stuff because there are some kids, young teenagers, and they're horribly fat. And the antipsychotic drugs are appetite stimulants.
Yeah.
That's why they're getting so fat.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course, they're at risk from diabetes.
That's the problem. Yeah, no, that's super bad.
Mm. I have some kids that come out to me from an international school that are medicated. And I realized that what they really needed to do above all was range. These are boys. So I stopped meeting them at our barn. And I started saying to the person bringing them, meet me in the forest at this car park. I'll be there with the horses at a certain time. And then let's just go into the forest and the horses will be available. So generally and I realized what happened, and these kids are between 7 and 10. And if you let them, they would range over about 10 kilometers, over about 5 miles of mixed terrain. And you could help them getting over. You need one person to look after the horse. And they would be climbing over logs and, of course, discovering all sorts of things in nature, but really working out because our terrain's very hilly.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of heavy work. OTs for years have talked about.
Right. But we wouldn't have to tell them to do it. They would just do it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes the people bringing them would say, oh, don't let them, they're supposed to be. And like, no, let them. And when we started really letting them, what was amazing was, as you say, we started to see these immense behavioral changes. And then when they were really tired at the end, we might find ourselves three kilometers, a mile and a half or more away from the barn. Then the horses came into play because then they wanted to ride home. And then, of course, all the vestibular stuff would happen on the horse. But we realized we got way more bang for the buck than if we just worked in arenas.
But that's, getting them out. The kids today aren't getting out and doing enough stuff. And way too many drugs are given out. Way too many. And then on the ADHD drugs, when you try those, you'll know right away whether they work or not. It'll be obvious. But a drug should have an obvious beneficial effect. Mm. And my health was deteriorating. So I went through my 20s. Worse and worse and worse colitis attacks.
Okay.
Absolutely horrible colitis attacks.
Stress-induced, do you think?
Oh, when I went on the medication, the colitis was almost cured.
Okay.
Almost.
And do you think the colitis was a buildup of cortisol in your system?
No, all it was my fear system was ramped up. Okay, I got bigger amygdala. My fear system was just turned on due to a physiological defect.
Right.
That ramped up the fear response when there was nothing to be afraid of. Mm-hmm. And the way I like to look at what the antidepressant did, it was like adjusting the idle screw on an old-fashioned carburetor. You'll know what that is. Mm. And so the engine is not racing. Mm. I know that's an old-fashioned analogy, but I think it's a really good one.
Yeah. It often seems that whether one is on the spectrum or not, the definition of modern life is that we're going through life with one foot on our internal accelerator and one foot on our brake. And
that would be a good way of putting it. And what that drug did, it was like turning the idle screw. So instead of cycling way up here, I'm now cycling down here.
But you keep the dose very, very, very small.
The dose is starter dose. It's an old drug. It's dysipramine.
Starter dose or less.
Old drug. And I take a starter dose. I've been on it since my early 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Same dose.
And you haven't built up a resistance to it or tolerance that makes it have to go up?
Well, because I resist the urge to take a higher dose. And that you can do this with the antidepressants.
How do you resist the urge?
I knew as a scientist I'd be in trouble. That I couldn't just be upping the dose. That would be bad.
Mm-hmm.
Took some willpower.
And but you weren't seeing a return of your symptoms or a worsening of your symptoms?
Oh, no.
Right.
No.
So what would have been the temptation to up the dose?
Well,
then?
okay, I went on the medication. The intensity of the engine racing was always less.
Right.
Always. And
So
what I really recommend, it's okay if it's the old edition of this book.
Thinking in pictures for those who are listening.
There's a chapter in there called A Believer in Biochemistry, and I'd recommend them reading that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's an old edition, that everything I'm telling you is still true. And Prozac is in here because that was invented in 1988.
When you are
people that have gone on a low dose of Prozac, where it's worked really well.
When you say you had to resist temptation not to up the dose, what was the temptation?
Well, just getting more and more nervous.
But
I knew in the past that my anxiety would go in cycles.
I see. So when you were cycling
I knew from the past.
Okay.
And that then the cycles would pass.
Right. So even when you were at the lower level of cycling, the temptation came when you were cycling up.
That's right.
And that was when you had to talk to yourself a little bit.
Yeah. And then I had to make sure I did the exercise.
So the exercise when you're on the up cycle.
I do the exercise every day.
Right.
And I'll tell you right now, do I enjoy it? No, I do not enjoy it. I figure it's something I have to do.
Yeah.
Every night. If I'm in a hotel room, I put a towel down on the floor and I do it.
Mm.
And the reason I'd rather do something like that because then there's no excuse for not doing it.
It also just
I can always put a towel down on the floor in a hotel.
It's interesting. My father, who's 91 this year, just religiously does his exercise routine. And, well, he's 91, and off to Zimbabwe this year by himself, even though, he's not as strong as he was, obviously.
Obviously, but people tell me I'm 77, I'll be 78 this summer. And they say, well, you're a lot more mobile than a lot of other people I know that are in their early 70s.
Yeah.
Well, because I make myself exercise. And then this new thing, connoisseur of the ceilings, I call it. And then when I'm outside, it's connoisseur of the tops of the lampposts. Or, well, if I'm walking in this neighborhood here, there's all 2-story homes. I'll look at the bottom edge of the roof.
Right.
And it's something I have to make myself do it. And it's helped my back. And I told a lady yesterday, I said, you need to really check out the steel trusses in our new supermarket. It's in a factory building.
Okay. So I've been taking some notes.
Black, they painted all the ceiling trusses black so that you don't see them as much. But you have to look up to see that. When what you do is you look up and you can see the ceiling, but you still have to see the floor. But you see, I realized that I'd hunch over and that I wasn't ever seeing the ceiling. And
So
then I got another
alternate
lady
between
doing it in a restaurant that had some really interesting stuff on the ceiling. And she says, oh, I never noticed all that wood stuff they had up on the ceiling. That's really interesting. She'd never seen it before.
It makes me feel another thing that might be a good idea then, as a equine practitioner, might be to put some interesting stuff hanging from the ceiling in the arena and in the other rooms that we use to encourage different vestibular positions.
Well, you
right?
said maybe it's doing something vestibular, but I found that did a lot for my back.
Mm.
And just one day, I realized all the ceilings that I'd walked under, I'd never seen them. Then when I started to look up, I go,
And there might be a Michelangelo up there. You just don't know.
well, no, there's like pigeons up there and stuff like that.
Well,
But oh
exactly.
boy, you can sure find a broken ceiling tile. You will find.
So while you've been talking, I've been taking some notes, and it's really interesting. A structure has evolved, which the majority of people listening to this particular podcast are going to be therapeutic riding practitioners.
Yes.
And so let me take you through. I've got 6 points on this. Let me just read them back to you,
Okay.
and then you tell me if there's anything we should add.
Okay.
So, number 1, get retirees into help. So you have
Yes.
cross-generational
Yeah, that's
skills
right.
being,
Yeah.
and then get those retirees to teach those skills, often practical skills.
Yep.
2, get kids greeting and selling.
Yeah, the other thing is I also want the retirees working with the 3-year-olds.
Okay.
The little nonverbal 3-year-olds, early intervention. I want retirees working on early intervention.
Specifically, why that population? Why?
Because they get no services otherwise.
Okay.
They're on a 2-year wait list.
Okay.
That's the reason why.
Okay. So get your retirees in, partly to do shop and practical skills for your older kids, and partly to do stuff with the nonverbals, because the nonverbals are on wait
little
lists.
kids.
Got it.
That little kids where they're on wait lists, they're not getting any therapy. We'll
So
call it horseplay.
Insta-grandparent, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, then
play, library play.
2, get kids greeting and selling, and
Yes.
set that up at your barn.
Yes.
A controlled environment, so
and that can be done very easily. Yeah.
Okay. 3, have a garden, have a shop, have a repair shop, and get the kids involved in that, not just the horses and the horse care.
Yeah.
What have we got here? Read my own terrible writing here. Oh yes. 4, a job, a paper round, or a dog walk. Again, because
paper rounds we don't have many.
Well, but one could recreate those.
I call it paper route substitutes.
Correct.
The dog walking, church volunteer jobs. Because the 11-year-olds got to learn how to do a task on a schedule where the boss is not family.
Right.
The boss is not family.
So let's say you're the therapeutic riding owner. You could set up, you could go to 5 or 6 neighbors and say, look, we need the kids to learn how to do this. We're going to have them deliver these things to you.
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah,
or
you could.
Walk your dog or something. So,
but they need to be learning.
Okay.
I've got to substitute. All our paper routes now, the ones that are left, are all done by grown-ups in cars now.
Exactly. So we could set that up and recreate that, which leads into the next one, which is hard exercise. Because of course, also, if you are having to pound the pavement a bit, and if you are having to
hard exercise, and what the OTs call heavy work, which would be using the wheelbarrow to clean stalls.
Yep.
And then when you put the horse poop in there, the wheelbarrow's a bit heavier.
Pushing.
And you got to take it somewhere, you got to dump it.
Yep.
And that's heavy work. OTs call that heavy work.
And perhaps you've got to navigate those wooden planks that you don't fall in the squishy bits on that side. And
doing some things that are heavy work. Okay, lifting up hay bales, some of the older individuals.
Okay. And again, our retirees could be helping with this.
Yeah, they can be helping assist it. And they don't have to do the lifting. The kids do the lifting.
But they can assist.
Right now, in my way, my back is I cannot lift a bale of hay.
Right.
That's something I cannot do.
And then
I can't pick up an entire box of books. So I've got a thing that wanted me bring a box of books, but I can't carry it in from the parking lot.
Right.
I can bring in like 3 or 4 books, but pick up a box of books. No, I had to give up this heavy briefcase I was carrying around. Well, now I just leave it at home and put my wallet with a leather string around my shoulder. And we don't bring the briefcase in from the parking garage. Okay. It's hurting my back. I had to stop doing that. And now in the airport, I put it on the other bag and it rolls now.
Right. I should imagine those.
Even if it doesn't have, even coming off the plane, I try to have it roll. I can't always do that, but
right.
Just carry
I should imagine that for the younger kids that are needing to learn how to lift and push a wheelbarrow and navigate
younger kids, you do this stuff.
that's not going to be a particularly heavy wheelbarrow, right? So
No,
it's going to feel heavy to the kid, but it's not going to be that heavy. So,
no, but you see, this is what the occupational therapists call heavy work.
mm, okay. And then 6, if there are meds involved, keep them on a starter dose or less.
Well, first of all, the starter dose thing is for the antidepressants.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Other drugs, you might have to have more than the starter dose. But for antidepressants, it's starter dose or less. That for that particular
Okay.
drugs, Prozac, Zoloft, okay, I'm using the old brand names,
Mm-hmm.
sertraline, paroxetine, that isn't a very good drug. I mean, that one.
And
But for
okay,
the antidepressants, it's
antidepressants. What
starter
about
dose or
anti-anxiety?
less. And other drugs, you may have to use the dose on the label, like some of the stimulants. The antidepressants, it's starter dose or less. But the thing I'm seeing, and I see this with a lot of nonverbal kids, they're like 7 drugs. And when you talk to the parents, no thought went into it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then you have some of these kids who got epilepsy. They're going to have to take medication for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. But again, one would expect that to be exceptional, not the norm.
Well, yeah, you want to basically, my principle is the younger the child, the more cautious you want to be about medication.
Okay. All right.
But on the other hand, I can't be totally against medication because one little medication changed my life.
Right. And this
And this is where I'd recommend reading this. I'm not just
Thinking in
saying I want to
Pictures.
sell books, but I think it's important that they read Thinking in Pictures.
Right. It just seems that there is so little moderation in the drugs.
Well, there's things where there's no thought went into it. Like you talk
Yeah.
to the parents. I said, why'd you do this drug? Or they might give out 3 drugs or 2 drugs at a time. You try one thing at a time and see what it does.
Why do you think pediatricians are giving out so many drugs? Because they must know the risks.
The parents call on them and they just wish they'd go away. And
Yeah.
it's kind of shocking sometimes the lack of thought that goes into it.
Hmm.
He's on 7 drugs. All right,
Yeah.
why this one? Why that one?
Yeah.
But on
Okay.
the other hand, you take your antipsychotics. In some cases where there is very, very severe sensory oversensitivity, a very tiny dose of risperidone, very tiny dose, way, way under a starter dose works. Now let's talk about sensory stuff like things that make noise, like a vacuum cleaner. If the child turns on the thing that makes noise, they can often get to tolerate it.
Because they have the agency and the
Where
choice.
they control it. A thing that makes noise, beeping a car horn, anything that makes noise when you turn it on, horse clippers, they turn it on.
The leaf blower.
Leaf
Right.
blower, that's another example.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've seen that go from feared thing to favorite toy.
Right. Okay. Going to add that to the list.
Yeah.
Turning on
Let them turn on the noisy things.
the noisy
The other
thing.
thing is don't wear headphones all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It'll make sound sensitivity worse. They can have them with them for control,
Mm-hmm.
but try not to wear them. You can have them with you, but try not to wear them.
Okay. So we've added 7.
Yeah.
For sensory stuff, let them have control and agency over the noisy, scary stuff.
Yeah. Where they can turn that noise on and off. Now, obviously, they can't turn a horse's whinny on and off.
No, but interestingly, we went through that with Rowan, with my son. And you know where we went through that was in Mongolia. So when, of course, we were working with the horses at home, the horses didn't whinny much because their herd was very close together. They didn't
they don't.
to call each other. When we went to Mongolia, the horses whinnied all the time because they were calling to each other across big distances, and it really freaked him out to begin with. And it took me a while to piece this together because he was semi-verbal. And then when I realized that was what was going on, I kept saying this thing of just horses saying hello. It's just horses saying hello. After a while, it became fine. But there was about a 10-day really awkward and difficult period, which I had not seen coming because our horses at home really didn't whinny much, you know. So what's your, but he did absolutely learn to
Yeah.
tolerate it, and then it became not a thing. Again, is it just about small doses? Doing things, letting things happen in small doses?
Well, and but the one thing that is, in a lot of situations, if they can control it, see,
Mm-hmm.
another thing to do is make an audio recording of
Could
when
make an audio recording, right?
and it has to be a
Turn
high
on
quality audio recording with all the nasty high frequencies.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. And then the final thing we've got here is number 8 is balancing stuff. So in
Yeah.
your playground, in your just anything you can get that's balancing for the vestibular system, for the cerebellum,
Yeah.
put that in there.
Yeah. And you should, of course, you're balancing when you're on a horse, you're balancing.
Mhm.
You have rhythm and
Absolutely.
balancing stimulates the cerebellum.
Because one of the things I'm often urging equine practitioners to do is think beyond the horse,
Okay.
because the kid may or may not want to ride today, even if they wanted to ride on Tuesday. And even if they love the horse every time they come, what tools are you giving to the family to take home that they can do in their living room or in a playground or some other
Well,
situation?
things like getting it, okay, may not have a vacuum cleaner at the stable, but then when some other noisy stuff, you let them turn on and off the leaf blower, let's say.
Yeah,
Then when they go back home, they can try that with the vacuum cleaner or the hair,
absolutely.
2 other noisy things.
One of the things we encourage people to do, and we had great success with this, was hang swings from your ceiling. Let the kids swing in the room at home because the weather's often bad. You may not be
Yeah, and
outside.
a lot of families actually have done that.
Yeah,
That's quite common.
worked
The
massively for
thing
us.
that I thought was so interesting, and I read Bill Gates's book,
Mm,
was the selling stuff and the party hostess,
mm.
and that we both did the same things.
Yeah, and I
She
guess one
got
could
him
so easily do that
in the
with
Cub
like
Scouts,
holidays.
and then I went in children's play group, organized play group in the summer,
Mm,
where they might have 8 or 9 kids, and they have an organized softball game. Or another time we went on a nature walk.
absolutely. I'm just thinking like today's Easter Monday, right? Easter Sunday, actually.
Yeah.
You know, one could so easily do themed parties at one's barn. A lot of people do your Easter thing, your Halloween thing, your 4th of July thing, your Christmas thing.
Oh,
And
and this is
the
where
kids
they
can be the
learn.
greeters. And yeah,
Well, you see, and I'm realizing how important those parties were,
mm,
where you had to greet people.
mm,
We were taught to say please and thank you. Like, it was in a store, you were checking out. Mother would say, "You forgot to say thank you." She'd say, when we were getting ready to leave, "You forgot to say," and then I'd go, "Thank you."
yeah.
But you see, that's 50s upbringing, and I think we need to be doing more of that kind of stuff.
I couldn't agree
And it's
more.
not difficult stuff to do.
No, it's not. But it has to be done without shame, so it doesn't become a fear thing. I remember when
No.
Rowan was verbal, becoming really verbal, and of course, you go through that phase where you're like, oh my gosh, I'll take anything, even if it's grouchy and negative.
Yeah.
And then I realized at a certain point, oh gosh, he needs to learn courtesy. How do
Yeah.
I do that? And I came up with this thing where I said to him, hey, do you want to learn a word of power? It's actually 3 words. If you say this, pretty much no one will be able to say no to you over most things. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, it's this. It's, could you possibly? And I said, look, I'll prove it to you. And I turned to his teacher. We were homeschooling, but we were doing it in a team. So his main teacher, Jenny, and I said, Jenny, stand on your head and do a fart, because we always use toilet humor, right? And Jenny went, no, I don't want to do that. And I said, okay. Jenny, please stand on your head and do a fart. She said, no, Rupert, I've told you I don't want to do that. I looked at Rowan. I said, now watch this. I said, Jenny, could you possibly stand on your head and do a fart, please? And she went, well, if you put it like that. And of course, she went up against the wall and made a noise. We did things like this for about 2 weeks, and about bang on 2 weeks, he came downstairs one morning and said, Dad, could you possibly get me a glass of water? And it stayed. And he kind of learned this
Well,
courtly
you
way of
learn
going
it.
through the
You
world.
learn it, and you see in these things we were taught please and thank you,
Mm,
and and then the party hostess thing. that's something that in the 50s, and see,
Mm.
Bill Gates is 8 years younger than me, so that would have been very early 60s.
Mm.
These things were done.
Yeah.
And then there's that scene where I go up and I ask the editor for his card. Well, all that party hostess stuff I had to do, I wasn't afraid to go up and ask for the card and ask for it really nicely.
Mm.
Like
Mm.
I was taught to greet people at the parties.
Mm. Yes,
And realized just how important that was.
and if we could set up a sort of play, Mr. and Mrs. Grouch role play, maybe that's again our retirees who are helping
I
us
do
out.
it after all the nice people, and once
Right.
in a while you get a grouch. Well, yeah, you'd go up to the house and they weren't interested, and they'd
Yeah.
shut the door.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of
And-
giving a
But-
safe way to
And he
develop that.
walked around the neighborhood, and then she'd take him to other neighborhoods, and she'd stop out in the street, and he'd go up to the house. She's right there; she can see the door.
Yeah.
But he has to go up there. Bill Gates had to go up there and ask the people wanted to buy the mixed nuts or not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we can do so much of this stuff at our therapeutic riding barns.
And it's simple stuff to
we can
do.
set these situations up. Yeah, we can.
And I think that would be really, really good.
Mm.
I think that'd be really, really good. Well, we've now been, we're coming up on 2 hours now.
We are. Is there anything you'd like to add, or do you feel we've
No, I
covered
think
it for
we've
this
talked
time?
about a lot of good things, and these are things that helped me,
Mm.
and I, you've got things that maybe some of your therapeutic riding places can start doing some of these things, but I think it's been really important to tap into the retirees,
Yeah.
for the little kids, and then teaching older kids skills.
Mm.
I think a lot of retirees would really enjoy doing this.
I agree. I so agree. And it's so interesting. We've talked here about the good effects of the horse, obviously, the vestibular system, what happens in the brain, what happens in the body. Great. But most of what we've talked about is actually not with the horse, that there needs to be this whole other universe around what's going on.
Well, you see, the other thing, when I took care of the horses, there's a responsibility.
Yeah.
I had to make sure I fed each horse the correct amount of feed.
Mm.
And when this horse got 1 scoop, this one got 1.5 scoops.
Yeah.
And I had to do that right. I had to put them in and out of the barn and clean the stalls.
At what age were you when you were given that level of responsibility?
15.
15. Yeah. Yeah.
I was 15.
I wouldn't be doing that with my little ones at this point. But what I
No,
do
no,
is
I was 15
right.
when I was doing that. Yeah, now I watched some kids come up to our riding center. They were maybe 3rd and 4th grade and just pick up some horse poop.
Yeah,
Totally
exactly.
supervised. They were
And
having a good time.
Right. I have,
Totally closed it with the level of responsibility I had. No, I was 15.
but there still is, even for the little ones, a small level of responsibility, right? One has to start young, but just within the range of what's reasonable. Yeah.
Well, and then it made me a little nervous because the kids going right too close to the horse's feet. I said, let's take the horse out of the pen. When we do
Yes.
this. I suggested that to them.
Yeah.
Let's just take the horse out.
I agree.
And these were not stalls. They were like run pens.
Exactly. Which is what we have. Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, let's just remove the horse from the pen. Because
Absolutely.
these were little kids. They were like 3rd grade.
And then they'll get run over.
They're
Absolutely.
8-year-old kids.
Cool. Well, listen, Temple, as ever, it's been, an honor and also just massively useful to be mentored by you.
All right, that's fine.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you like what we're doing here, please do like, subscribe, tell a friend. It so helps us to get this valuable work done and the message of equine assisted stuff out there. And if you're interested in more conversations, you might want to check out our Live Free, Ride Free podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcasts, please go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. If you're a professional in the equine assisted field or are considering a career in the equine assisted field, you might want to check out our 3 certification programs: Horseboy Method, Movement Method, and Taquine Equine Integration. You can find all of those over on newtrailslearning.com. And finally, if you want to check out our cool rock and roll themed merch, back on rupertisaacson.com, please click on shop You'll find all kinds of fun goodies there. And if you're looking for a way to spend time until the next podcast, you might want to consider reading the books that kicked all this off: The Horse Boy, The Long Ride Home, and The Healing Land. So see you next time on Equine Assisted World. Join us for the adventure.